The phone buzzed on my cluttered desk like a warning siren. I hesitated, staring at the name flashing on the screen, Mr. Langford's office. My heart sank before I even picked it up. It had been years since anyone from the Langford household had bothered to call me. Years. "Hello," I said, trying to sound casual. My voice betrayed me, thin and uncertain. "Ah, good," you answered, a smooth, practiced voice replied. "This is Mr. Harlan, the family's legal advisor. I'll get straight to the point. We have a proposition for you. It's lucrative. Your childhood friend, Vivian Langford, well, as you know, she's been in a coma for some time now. Her family, they want you to marry her." I choked on my coffee. "Wait, what?" I stared at the mug as if it had suddenly turned into molten lava. "Marry her," I repeated, my words tasting foreign and wrong. "She's in a coma." "Yes. But it's more than that, isn't it? The Langfords are generous. They'll provide a substantial financial arrangement for your compliance. You understand the scope of the offer." The tone was almost clinical, like they were offering me a new phone plan, not a life-altering moral compromise. I sank into the chair, cold creeping into my fingertips. My mind raced. Money, freedom, escape from my dead-end apartment, from my paycheck-to-paycheck life. But, marry her. A shadow moved behind Harlan, Mr. Langford's cousin, Julian. Tall, impeccably dressed, charming in that infuriating way people use to manipulate without effort. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's really quite straightforward," he said smoothly. "You get compensated generously, Vivian's family maintains appearances, and everything proceeds seamlessly." I felt the weight of the room pressing on me. The way they talked about Vivian, my Vivian, as if she were a commodity, a ledger entry, made my stomach turn. And yet, the number they mentioned lingered in my mind, sparkling like a dangerous temptation. I could finally pay off rent for a year, maybe two. I shook my head violently, trying to chase the thought away. My memories of her, of us, flooded in. Tiny laughter echoing through the schoolyard, whispered secrets under the old oak tree, promises we made about chasing dreams together. She had always believed in me. Always. And now, I was being asked to sign a contract to profit off her unconscious body. Julian leaned against the doorway, watching me carefully. "I know this might feel uncomfortable. But think of it as, helping her family maintain stability. And yourself, of course." His voice was smooth, persuasive, but I caught the subtle undercurrent, the way he measured my hesitation, testing how far he could push. Then, like a dagger through my chest, it hit me, I wasn't just making a decision about money. I was betraying everything we'd shared. Our childhood. Our memories. The unspoken bond that had tied us together for so many years. And I might even convince myself it was okay. The phone call ended, leaving a ringing silence that felt heavier than any conversation I'd ever had. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the sudden weight pressing on my chest. That's when my phone buzzed again, this time, a group chat notification. Vivian's family group. "We've discussed terms. John will proceed with the contract marriage. Congratulations all around." I stared at the message, frozen. The casual tone, the emojis, they treated it like party planning, like a wedding invitation for someone who couldn't even object. I felt a strange mixture of nausea, disbelief, and betrayal. And beneath it all, a gnawing fear, am I losing myself in this deal? I glanced at my desk and spotted an old photograph of Vivian and me, taken years ago during a summer festival. We were laughing, faces pressed close, arms wrapped around each other like we were the only people in the world. That girl, the one whose ice-cold fingertips I used to hold as we ran through sprinklers. She had trusted me once. Could I betray her so easily now? My phone buzzed again, and I saw Julian's name lighting up the screen. A reminder? I swiped reluctantly. "Remember, John," his message read, "opportunities like this don't come twice. Think carefully." I slammed the phone down. My apartment felt smaller, suffocating. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook, cold sweat pooling at my temples. I paced across the room, whispering to myself, fragments of old memories colliding with the moral quagmire I now faced. The offer, the money, was tempting, yes. But the thought of lying beside her in a marriage ceremony, of signing papers that reduced her existence to a contract, made me feel like I was stepping off a cliff into moral oblivion. I sank onto the floor, pressing my forehead against my knees. The silence of the apartment stretched around me, echoing the moral emptiness I felt inside. And then, almost as if she were there, I whispered her name. Vivian. What have I gotten myself into? Outside, the city pulsed with life. Inside, I realized mine might never be the same. Chapter 2. I wake up to the sound of my alarm buzzing insistently, but the world feels muted, like I'm submerged underwater. The sunlight slices through the blinds, scattering across my messy apartment floor, but instead of comfort, it highlights the chaos in my mind. The events from yesterday, Harlan's call, Julian's smirk, the cold group chat confirming the contract, hang over me like a storm cloud I can't shake. I sit on the edge of my bed, running my fingers through my hair, trying to collect thoughts that feel like they've turned to smoke. Every time I close my eyes, I see her. Vivian. Her face, frozen in time, innocence untouched by the manipulations of adults around us. And I feel responsible. Somehow, this deal, this absurd contract, makes me complicit in something that feels both immoral and impossible to explain. I remember the old oak tree behind our elementary school. I can almost feel its bark beneath my fingertips, rough and reassuring. Vivian and I spent countless afternoons there, whispering about the future. One day, we'll see the world, she had said, eyes wide with wonder. Promise me we won't settle for ordinary. I had promised her. And now here I am, staring down a contract that feels like the opposite of everything we ever dreamed of. It's not just a financial decision. It's a moral crucible. If I agree, I'll be profiting off someone who cannot consent, whose voice has been silenced. If I refuse, I'll sink deeper into debt, suffocate in mediocrity, fail to help the family that relies on me, and maybe never get another chance at the kind of stability I've been chasing. I close my eyes and imagine my father's face, the way he used to frown over unpaid bills, the worry etched into his brow every month. Mom, too, counting coins for groceries, whispering that someday we'd rise above this. Their dreams have always been mine, too, even if I've tried to keep them at arm's length. I can't ignore that responsibility anymore. And yet, Vivian, that girl I've known since we were 5, laughing until our sides hurt, plotting secret adventures across the neighborhood. She was never just a friend, maybe she was the only person who understood me completely. And now, I'm being asked to marry her while she can't even respond. To sign papers that treat her like a lifeless symbol, a solution to a problem I didn't create. I feel the weight of my hands on my knees. Cold, clammy. My chest tightens with guilt and panic. Am I a monster for even considering this? My rational mind argues that I'm doing it for survival, for duty. But the rest of me, the part that remembers childhood summers, the tiny hands we held, the promises whispered under starry skies, rebels against it. I swing my legs over the side of the bed, pacing, restless. I need to focus. I need a reason beyond money, beyond obligation. And I find it in the small, stubborn flame I've always carried, my dream. I want to create something that is mine, something I can look at and say, I made this happen. Maybe it's the photography business I've been nurturing quietly, snapping photos of the city streets at dawn, finding beauty in the overlooked. Maybe it's finally finishing that novel I've been scribbling since college, the one filled with stories I can't tell anyone else. Maybe it's just proving that I am more than the circumstances I was born into. For the first time in hours, I feel a sliver of control. This contract doesn't define me. My actions will. I can accept the deal if I must, but only on my terms. Only if I can protect the pieces of myself that still matter. My integrity. My ambition. My dreams. And Vivian. I can't help but wonder if she would understand. Our bond has always been complicated. We argued like siblings, teased like enemies, and loved like only children can, pure, unguarded, fearless. She always challenged me, pushed me toward better versions of myself. I know that somewhere beneath the stillness, beneath the silence of her coma, she would want me to choose wisely. I sink back onto the bed, staring at the ceiling as the sun shifts across the room. My reflection stares back at me from the mirror, tired, conflicted, but determined. Whatever path I take, I have to do it on my own terms. I whisper to the empty room, almost as if she's there. Vivian, I'll figure this out. I'll survive this, and I'll do right by both of us, somehow. The apartment is quiet again, but the weight in my chest has shifted slightly. Not gone, but lighter. I have a mission now, one that isn't just about survival. It's about proving to myself that I can navigate this world without losing the person I am beneath all the chaos. And maybe, just maybe, I'll find a way to honor her trust without betraying my own. Chapter 3. The Langford estate looms ahead as I pull up in my beat-up sedan, its engine protesting against the hill driveway. The sun glints off polished marble and manicured gardens, and I feel immediately out of place, a shadow of someone who never belonged in this world of wealth and curated perfection. My hands tighten on the steering wheel, a mixture of anticipation and dread knotting my stomach. I take a deep breath and step out. The air smells faintly of roses and expensive perfume, a scent I've always associated with privilege I can't touch. Inside the grand foyer, Vivian's family greets me formally, warm but distant, all smiles hiding the weight of expectation. And then I see him. Julian. He stands leaning against a column, a picture of effortless confidence. Suit perfectly tailored, hair immaculate, that infuriatingly charming half-smile that makes people trust him before they even know him. He extends a hand as I approach. "John," he says, voice smooth and measured, "I've heard so much about you. It's fascinating, really, how life brings us back to familiar faces, isn't it?" I take his hand, trying to hide the tension in my grip. "Yeah," I mutter, forcing a polite smile. There's something calculated about him, subtle, almost invisible. But it makes my skin crawl. Julian has that kind of presence that bends the room toward him without effort. He greets Vivian's family with easy charm, making them laugh at jokes that are only slightly amusing. And I notice how every glance, every gesture, seems designed to remind them, and me, of his place in this world. The meeting begins. Papers are shuffled, contracts discussed. Julian speaks often, sprinkling compliments aimed at the family while slipping in pointed comments to me. "Of course, John," he says casually, almost as an afterthought, "I imagine this sort of arrangement must be new to you. It's quite an undertaking. But I trust you'll manage." His tone is light, but it lands heavily, insinuating doubt about my capability. Everyone laughs politely. I feel a flush rising in my chest, irritation mixing with unease. I remind myself to breathe. I'm not here to compete socially. I'm here to survive. To navigate this contract with as much dignity as I can. But Julian makes it hard. Every casual smile, every polished comment, feels like a challenge, a quiet claim, "I belong here more than you ever could." As the discussion continues, I begin noticing the patterns, how he subtly frames the conversation, steering decisions while letting others feel they've made the choice. He's not just charming, he's strategic, watching my reactions, testing my limits, measuring how far I'll bend. And I realize, with a sinking feeling, that the contract is far more than a financial agreement. It's a trap laced with social obligations, moral compromise, and constant surveillance. My mind flashes back to Vivian, lying unconscious somewhere within these walls or nearby. How ironic it is that her name, her life, has become a chess piece in a game I never agreed to play. And now, Julian is already trying to position me as the pawn. At one point, he leans in slightly, voice lowered, charm in his tone but edges sharpened. "I know you care about her," he says. "And that's admirable. But sometimes, loyalty isn't enough. Strategy matters. Timing matters. You'll see soon enough." I feel a jolt of anger, a mix of fear and indignation. He's right, in a way. This isn't about money anymore, it's about navigating invisible currents I can barely perceive. I can't trust my instincts alone, I have to anticipate manipulation, manage perception, and survive scrutiny. And Julian, he's already 3 steps ahead. By the end of the meeting, the family is satisfied, cheerful, convinced everything is under control. Julian lingers near the door, glancing at me with that smug, knowing smile. I can feel the tension in his gaze, an unspoken challenge. As I leave the estate, my car winding down the driveway, I feel the weight of the day pressing on me. This isn't just a contract marriage. This is a minefield. And Julian? He's already planted the first set of mines. I grip the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white. I have to be careful. I have to think ahead. I have to survive this game without losing myself, or Vivian, in the process. And for the first time, I realize just how dangerous this situation truly is. Chapter 4. The ballroom sparkles like a frozen galaxy. Crystal chandeliers scatter light across polished marble floors, and the faint scent of orchids and champagne drifts in the air. I step inside, clutching my jacket a little too tightly, feeling like a shadow in a room full of stars. This is not my world. Not yet. Guests chatter politely, glasses clinking, laughter carrying over soft classical music. Every glance toward me is measured, polite curiosity, the kind that makes me itch under my skin. I know why they're watching. I'm here to represent a contract marriage with Vivian Langford, even though she lies unconscious miles from this glittering stage. Her name slips into conversations now and then, always soft, always laden with concern. Vivian's recovery has been slow but steady, someone whispers. John's been a steady presence, so thoughtful. I force a smile, nodding. My chest tightens. I've barely spoken to her in years, and now I'm being lauded for being present to a girl who can't even know it. Julian appears near the center of the room, as always perfectly poised, flanked by admirers who hang on every word. He smiles at me, not warmly, but knowingly, as if he can read my unease like an open book. He sidles close, voice smooth. Quite the crowd tonight, isn't it? He murmurs. So many eyes. Must be daunting, being in your position. I grit my teeth. Not as daunting as some people might think, I reply, keeping my tone light but firm. The small rebellion makes my heart race, but I won't give him the satisfaction of seeing me falter. He laughs softly, too soft, and moves on, leaving behind a trail of subtle tension. I can feel the weight of his scrutiny even from across the room. He knows exactly how to press, how to nudge, how to make a person feel small without seeming cruel. A hand on my shoulder startles me. I turn to see David, my friend since high school, leaning in, concern etched on his face. Hey, he says quietly, glancing around as if to make sure no one is eavesdropping, you handled that well. Julian's charm isn't everything. Remember that. I exhale, relief washing over me. David is grounding, the reminder that loyalty and honesty still exist outside this gilded cage. Thanks, I mutter. Sometimes it feels like he's everywhere at once. David nods knowingly. That's how he works. But you're not invisible. Don't let him make you feel that way. You're here on your own terms, too. I glance toward the Langford family, hearing snippets of updates about Vivian's condition. My stomach twists, guilt and anxiety bubbling up. Yet David's presence reminds me I don't have to let guilt paralyze me. I can act with intention, even here, even now. A waiter passes with a tray of champagne flutes. Julian intercepts him, selecting a glass, and turns toward me with that infuriatingly easy smile. May I offer you a suggestion? He says, voice honeyed. I raise an eyebrow, keeping my composure. I'm listening. He leans slightly closer, low enough for only me to hear. Sometimes, the smartest move is to nod and agree. It keeps things simple. I shake my head, a subtle but deliberate gesture. Sometimes the smartest move is to speak your mind. Julian's eyes flicker briefly, surprise, maybe irritation, but he masks it instantly with that perfect smile. He moves away, and I feel a small, quiet victory. The room doesn't explode, no one scolds me. I've asserted myself without collapsing under social pressure. David claps me lightly on the back. See? That wasn't so bad. I glance around the room, taking in the glittering chaos, the whispered updates about Vivian, the unspoken scrutiny, the rival's lurking presence. I realize this world isn't just about money or appearances, it's a subtle battlefield, and I need allies, strategy, and courage. As the evening winds down, I step out onto the terrace, letting the cool night air wash over me. The city lights stretch endlessly below, a reminder that my world exists beyond these gilded walls, beyond the manipulations and passive pressures. I light a cigarette, something I rarely do, and inhale deeply, feeling the tension ease, if only slightly. David joins me, silent but steady. You did good tonight, he says. Small steps, John. Small steps. I nod, staring at the skyline, the stars faintly reflected in the glassy buildings. Small steps, yes, but steps nonetheless. And tonight, I've begun walking my own path, even if the shadow of the contract, of Julian, and of Vivian's silent presence looms over me. For the first time, I feel a flicker of confidence. I can navigate this world. I can assert myself. I can survive this game without losing who I am. But the night hums with tension, and I know, it's only the beginning. Chapter 5. The gallery was alive with polite chatter, clinking glasses, and the faint scent of oil paint and fresh flowers. I moved through the crowd, trying to appear calm, but every glance toward Julian made my pulse quicken. He leaned against the marble railing with that infuriatingly confident ease, already drawing attention with his practiced charm. I barely made it past the main exhibit when I felt it, the first jab. Julian caught my eye and smiled. Not a friendly smile, but one that carried the faintest edge of mockery. "John," he said, loud enough for a few nearby guests to hear, "I didn't expect you to manage the social side of things so gracefully." I froze for half a second, caught off guard. Graceful? A subtle dig masked as a compliment. I glanced at the others nearby. A few guests laughed softly, a couple exchanged glances, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Even Vivian's parents were watching, smiling politely but with that unspoken scrutiny I knew too well. I took a slow breath, feeling the tension coil in my chest. My mind raced. How do I respond without looking foolish, without giving him the satisfaction of a reaction? "Julian," I said carefully, voice steady, "I've found that grace doesn't always have to be performative." A pause. The edges of his smile flickered, just for a moment. His eyes narrowed slightly, the first crack in his confident armor. "Touché," he murmured, still smooth, still dangerous. But I'd taken a small victory, subtle, quiet, but mine. Vivian's mother interjected then, her voice soft but authoritative. "John, it's very kind of you to take such an interest in Vivian's affairs. We do appreciate your attentiveness." I forced a smile, nodding politely, but inside my stomach twisted. Their praise, meant to reassure, felt like another layer of pressure. They saw me as part of this arrangement, this contract, this obligation. Not me. And the more I tried to assert myself, the more entangled I felt. Julian, sensing the tension shift, leaned closer to a small cluster of onlookers and whispered something inaudible, the kind of subtle manipulation designed to make everyone question my capability. I caught the glance from one of the younger guests, curiosity, maybe doubt. He was working the room like a maestro, every note calculated. David, appearing just at the edge of the scene, gave me a small nod of encouragement. His presence was grounding, a reminder that not all eyes were judging me, not all hands were playing against me. I swallowed, remembering that loyalty and integrity still mattered, even here. I straightened my back, deciding not to yield. When Julian made another sly comment, implying I might not fully understand the social expectations of the event, I responded firmly, without hesitation. "I understand perfectly, Julian. But I also understand that social grace means nothing if it comes at the cost of honesty." A ripple of surprise moved through the group. Julian's lips pressed into a thin line, but he said nothing, and the moment passed. A small victory, yes, but the encounter left my chest tight, my mind buzzing with unease. As the night went on, I realized the weight of this contract wasn't just financial. It was social, emotional, even legal. Every interaction, every word spoken or unspoken, could influence perceptions, shape relationships, and define obligations I hadn't yet considered. Vivian's silence didn't make things simpler, it made them more complicated. By the time I stepped out onto the quiet terrace, the city lights stretching endlessly below, I felt drained but resolute. Julian had provoked me publicly, tested my composure, and revealed the subtle webs this arrangement could weave. But I had survived, and I had responded on my own terms. I lit a cigarette, inhaling the night air. David joined me shortly after, silent but reassuring. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "He's dangerous, but you're learning. That's the first step." I exhaled slowly, watching the smoke drift into the night. Dangerous, yes. And this was only the beginning. I understood now, this contract was a battlefield, and I had to navigate it carefully, or risk losing more than money. Chapter 6. My phone vibrates insistently against the nightstand, cutting through the silence of my apartment. I squint at the screen, the Langford family number flashes, or maybe it's Julian, I can never tell who's behind the messages these days. My heart tightens. It's late, far too late for anyone to call with anything important. I hesitate, thumb hovering over the answer button. Part of me wants to ignore it, let it go to voicemail, but the other part, stubborn, curious, guilty, presses me to pick up. "Hello." My voice is hoarse, a mix of exhaustion and tension. John, the familiar, silky tone of Julian, or perhaps Vivian's father, fills the line. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I felt it necessary to reach out. There are matters that need discussion." I sit up, propping myself against the headboard. The shadows in my room stretch across the walls like fingers, mirroring the tightening knot in my stomach. I can already sense the manipulation hiding beneath polite words. "You've been handling everything admirably," the voice continues, smooth, measured. "But there are considerations, obligations, paths that might be more beneficial if you follow guidance. I flinch. Guidance. The word tastes bitter. They're asking me to cede my will, to walk a path paved by others while pretending it's my own. My chest aches with frustration. I appreciate the concern, I say carefully, but I make my own decisions. There's a pause on the other end, just long enough for doubt to creep in, for hesitation to register in my own mind. The voice softens. John, this is for Vivian's best interest. And for your own. There's no shame in letting someone help you navigate difficult circumstances. I close my eyes, the ceiling spinning in the dim lamplight. Difficult circumstances. That's one way to put it. Being asked to marry a girl in a coma, navigating family politics, dealing with Julian's constant undermining, yes. Difficult. But my gut screams that following someone else's plan will chain me further than I already am. I think of Vivian, not just the unconscious girl everyone treats like a possession, but the vibrant, fearless child I knew, the one who laughed until her sides hurt, the one who dared to dream and expected me to do the same. If she could see this situation, I imagine her voice in my head, clear and commanding, John, you make your own choices. Don't let them decide for you. The phone call continues, but I barely hear the words. I'm caught in the storm of my own thoughts, the contract, the rival, the expectations, the social web entangling me. They want me to move in their current, to follow their currents. But I won't. Not anymore. John. The voice is gentler now, coaxing. We only want to help. I take a deep, shuddering breath, cutting through the calm veneer of the speaker's tone. I understand that. But I will not follow anyone's plan blindly. I will make my own decisions, for Vivian, for me, and for the life I intend to live. Silence. And then the line clicks dead. I drop the phone onto the bed, staring at it as though it might explode with the weight of consequences. My hands are trembling, not from fear, but from the clarity that surges through me. This isn't just a contract, a rivalry, a social game. This is a crucible. Every choice I make will define who I am, and the only path worth walking is the one I forge myself. I lie back, staring at the ceiling, the shadows stretched long and still. The night is quiet again, but something within me has shifted. The fear, the anxiety, the moral conflict, all of it is still there, but beneath it, a fierce resolve begins to burn. I will navigate this contract on my terms. I will face Julian, the family, the expectations, and the world with my own choices. And if that means standing alone, so be it. For the first time in days, I feel a quiet sense of peace. Not comfort, never comfort, but clarity. The storm is still raging outside, but inside, I have found my compass. I whisper into the darkness, almost to myself. I will do this my way. And no one, will steer me off it. The night stretches on, endless and silent, but I feel ready. Chapter 7. It was the kind of night where the city hums beneath your window, a low, constant vibration that seeps into your chest. I was scrolling mindlessly through my phone, trying to unwind after another tense day navigating the Langford labyrinth, when something made my stomach drop. A notification popped up, Vivian's social media feed. Normally, I avoid it, knowing it's just curated snapshots of a life I can't access, a world I'm technically part of but never truly belong to. But tonight, I clicked. There it was, a photo of Julian and her cousin, leaning a little too close, laughing a little too easily, at a charity event. But what caught my attention wasn't the picture itself. It was the caption, subtle yet loaded, always grateful for guidance and wise company at every step. Hashtag Team Langford, hashtag New Beginnings. My hands tightened around the phone, knuckles whitening. Guidance. New beginnings. And Julian? He was front and center, smiling as though he had orchestrated the entire moment. I scrolled further, and my chest constricted. Another post, a story, a casual video clip of Julian speaking directly with Vivian's parents, her father nodding in agreement, her mother smiling warmly. I could hear the words in my head, even without the audio. John is doing his best, but I think this path makes the most sense. The betrayal hit in waves. Subtle, almost invisible, but undeniable. Every suspicion I'd harbored crystallized into a sharp, painful truth. This wasn't just about money or appearances. Julian had embedded himself deeply into the Langford circle, shaping decisions, nudging outcomes, steering the narrative. And no one, not even Vivian's family, realized how far this influence had gone. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the comments, admiration, approval, praise for Julian's wisdom and guidance. And there it was again, faint but unmistakable, the implicit positioning of me as an outsider. Not unfit, but replaceable. A mixture of anger and clarity surged through me. My throat tightened, my vision blurred, but the fire burning inside refused to die out. I realized something crucial: Julian's manipulation wasn't just a nuisance, it was a warning. A test. And if I allowed it to continue, I'd lose more than leverage or pride. I'd lose control of my own life. I slammed the phone down on the nightstand, the glow of the screen fading into darkness. My fists clenched. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, rapid and insistent. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a whisper, a photo, a hashtag that shifts the ground beneath you. But I wasn't going to be a victim. Not tonight, not ever. I paced the small apartment, thoughts colliding in a storm of frustration and determination. Every calculated move Julian had made, every smile and subtle suggestion, it would not define me. I would respond, yes, but on my terms, guided by my own choices, my own principles. I thought of Vivian, of her silent presence, of the child we once were, the friendship that had never truly faded despite time, distance, and now manipulation. I thought of the contract, of the social traps, of the power games that lay ahead. And I made a vow, as firm as the floor beneath my feet. I would not be sidelined. I would not be coerced. I would not let Julian, or anyone, dictate the path my life would take. The fire inside me burned brighter, a fierce, unyielding blaze. Anger sharpened my focus, clarity cleared my vision, and determination anchored my resolve. I picked up the phone again, but this time with purpose. Messages to allies, notes to myself, plans forming in the quiet of the night. Julian had shown his hand. Now it was my turn to play the game, not blindly, not timidly, but with eyes wide open, heart steady, and mind unyielding. The night stretched on, deep and silent, but I felt unstoppable. Chapter 8. I never thought leaving could feel like breathing for the first time. The city's skyline recedes behind me as the train pulls away from the station, and with every mile, I feel layers of weight peeling off my shoulders. Julian's influence, the Langford expectations, the social scrutiny, they're all shrinking into the distance, leaving space for me to occupy my own life. The apartment I've left behind feels like a distant memory, a stage where I played someone else's part. My phone buzzes once, twice, messages from David, gentle encouragement, but no pressure. No one else. I realize how rare that is, a world where my choices are my own, and the consequences belong only to me. I stop at the small cafe near the new apartment I rented, a modest space with sunlight spilling across wooden tables, the aroma of fresh coffee grounding me. I sit by the window and watch the street move in its chaotic rhythm. For the first time in months, maybe years, I feel untethered, and not in the empty, anxious way I once feared. Untethered in the sense that life is mine to navigate. But freedom doesn't come without confrontation. Later that afternoon, I received a call, Vivian's father. His tone is polite, measured, but the underlying expectation is clear. John, we noticed you've been distant. This sudden move, leaving the city, it's concerning. Are you reconsidering your responsibilities? I breathe, calmness steadying me. I've reconsidered, I say. My responsibilities are my own. And I need to make choices that align with who I am, not what anyone else expects of me. A pause. I hear the tension, the unspoken pressure. But John. No, I interrupt, firmly. This is my path. And while I respect your concern, my life is not a contract to be managed. I'm not refusing care or respect for Vivian, I'm reclaiming my own life. The silence stretches, weighted but liberating. I hang up, feeling a strange combination of guilt, fear, and an odd exhilaration. Each step away from them, each assertion of independence, chisels away the chains I didn't know were binding me. Later that week, Julian's messages arrive. Subtle, laced with charm and veiled threats. It's lonely out there, John. Are you sure you want to do this alone? I read them, thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I delete. I don't owe him explanation, reaction, or attention. His manipulation no longer has power over me. Walking home, I pause at the edge of a small park. The sunset casts streaks of orange and violet across the sky, reflecting in the quiet pond. I catch my own reflection, distorted by ripples, and I realize something profound. I see a man responsible for himself, unshackled from expectation, capable of choosing his own way. I pull out a small notebook, one I've carried but barely touched since the contract began, and begin to write, not about obligations, not about expectations, but about plans, dreams, and ideas that belong solely to me. Each word is a small act of reclamation, a testament to independence earned through struggle. David joins me later, carrying coffee, sitting silently beside me. No judgment, no commentary, just presence. "Looks like you're finally settling in," he says quietly. I smile, watching the ripples on the water catch the last light of the sun. "I'm seeing life as my own again," I admit. And for the first time, I truly believe it. Freedom isn't just leaving, it's claiming what belongs to you, even if the world, or your past, tries to tether you. Tonight, the city feels expansive. The future feels possible. The contract, the rivalry, the manipulation, they are shadows, receding as I walk forward, step by deliberate step. And I will not look back. Chapter 9. The city smelled different. Not of polished marble and imported perfumes, but of rain on asphalt, roasted chestnuts from street vendors, and the faint diesel of buses that groaned their way through narrow streets. It wasn't glamorous, not in the way the Langfords' world had been. But it was mine. For the first time in months, no one recognized my face. No whispers in corridors, no calculating smiles measuring how much of me belonged to Vivian's fortune. Here, I was simply John, another newcomer renting a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, trying to make sense of my own life. The adjustment wasn't smooth. The walls of my new place were thin enough that I could hear the neighbor's television at night. My first grocery run left me staring too long at prices, calculating every item, reminding myself that my money was finite. But each frustration felt oddly invigorating, like my problems were finally my own. Work came quickly, though not in the form I once imagined. A small publishing house downtown needed a part-time assistant. Filing manuscripts, fetching coffee, running errands, nothing extraordinary. Yet when I stepped into that cramped office with its leaning bookshelves and half-broken printer, I felt a spark of belonging. People here looked at me without the weight of legacy. Marta, the editor with round glasses and a laugh too big for the room, asked me about my writing once, not about contracts or marriages. Sam, a fellow assistant, cracked jokes about how both of us were underpaid but overcaffeinated. They knew nothing of Vivian, nothing of Julian, nothing of the strings that had tangled my life. And I found I didn't want to correct them. At lunch breaks, we'd gather around plastic tables, gossiping about authors with impossible egos or manuscripts that looked like they'd been typed by a cat. It was ordinary. Refreshingly, beautifully ordinary. But the past had sharp claws, and it didn't let go so easily. One evening, scrolling through my phone, I stumbled upon an article, "Julian Crest steps forward as Langford family advisor amidst uncertain times." His picture dominated the page, tailored suit, perfect smile, the kind of charm that cameras adored. The article painted him as indispensable, guiding the Langfords through delicate legal matters, in Vivian's absence. My stomach tightened. Even here, in a city 2 hours away, his shadow reached me. He wasn't just circling. He was burrowing himself deeper into the family's confidence. And though I had walked away, I couldn't shake the knowledge that he was playing a game I once unwillingly joined. For a moment, I wondered what people here would think if they knew who I was, if Marta would still laugh with me, if Sam would still complain about the broken printer, if they'd look at me differently knowing I was tied to wealth, secrets, and a girl in a coma. That thought chilled me. I realized then that what I craved most wasn't anonymity, it was authenticity. I wanted people to see me, not the contract. And so I began to rediscover what me even meant. At night, I'd open my old notebook, the one I had scribbled in during stolen moments before life twisted out of control. Stories, ideas, fragments of dreams. A page about a boy who wanted to build a bookstore by the sea. Another about a man who found freedom in the sound of trains. I added new words to those pages now, tentative but alive. The act of writing wasn't just an escape, it was a reclamation. In the mornings, I'd walk to the park near my apartment, sipping cheap coffee, watching strangers walk their dogs or chase after children. No chauffeurs, no designer gowns, no whispered judgments. Just life in its raw, unpolished form. I felt invisible here, but in the best possible way. One afternoon, David called. His voice was steady, warm. "So, how's the new world treating you?" "Loud neighbors, leaky faucets, and a boss who swears at the printer every morning," I said with a laugh. "It's perfect." He chuckled softly. You sound lighter. Different. I paused, looking out the window at the bustling street below. I think I'm finally becoming myself again. Or maybe for the first time. But loneliness still lingered in the quiet hours. There were nights when I'd think of Vivian, not as the girl in the coma, but as the child who once shared her crayons with me, who laughed too loudly at my silly impressions. That memory was bittersweet, reminding me why I'd signed that contract in the first place. My bond with her wasn't gone, even if she wasn't awake to see it. Yet now, that bond wasn't a cage. It was simply a part of me. Not my whole identity. And as the weeks turned into months, I found myself building small routines, writing for an hour before work, jogging by the river, sharing meals with new friends. Each step layered bricks into a foundation I thought I'd lost. The rival, the contract, the coma, they were threads in my story, but no longer the whole tapestry. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by betrayal or obligation. I was defined by choice. By growth. One night, sitting on the balcony of my small apartment, I watched the city lights flicker against the dark sky. The hum of traffic, the laughter of strangers below, the cool air brushing against my skin, it all blended into a single realization: I was not running anymore. I was living. And as I scribbled in my notebook, I wrote a line that felt like a promise. I am not just the boy who married a girl in a coma. I am the man who chose to grow beyond it. Chapter 10. The call came at 2:14 a.m. At first, I thought it was a dream, the kind of cruel, half-real illusion that creeps into restless nights. My phone buzzed against the nightstand, dragging me out of sleep, and when I finally answered, a voice I didn't recognize said words that stopped my breathing. Mr. Hale. This is St. Augustine's Hospital. It's about Vivian Langford. She's awake. Awake. The word lodged in my chest like glass. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, the silence of my small apartment suddenly unbearable. For months, I had trained myself not to imagine this possibility, not to cling to it like a lifeline. And now, without warning, it was reality. I should have felt joy, shouldn't I? Relief, at the very least. Instead, dread trickled through me, mixing with something that might have been hope. My entire body trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of what her awakening meant. Still, I found myself moving, pulling on clothes with clumsy hands, stumbling into the night. The hospital smelled exactly as I remembered: bleach, stale air conditioning, and the metallic tang of fear. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, too bright, too harsh. Every step down the sterile hallways felt like retracing old wounds. Nurses glanced at me with polite recognition. Some of the doctors even nodded, as though I were still part of the Langford world, still tethered to Vivian's bed like an ornament. But their eyes were different now, warmer, almost approving. She had woken, and by extension, I had value again. I hated that thought. A member of her family was already there. Her aunt, thin-lipped and sharp-eyed, greeted me with a faint smile. You came quickly. She'll be glad to see you. I said nothing. My throat was dry. When I finally reached her room, I froze at the threshold. Vivian was awake. Her eyes, those familiar hazel eyes from years ago, blinked slowly against the pale hospital light. She looked frail, thinner than before, with hair tangled from months of stillness, but she was undeniably alive. Her chest rose and fell, her lips parted slightly as she whispered something to the nurse at her side. Then her gaze shifted. And she saw me. For a moment, time folded in on itself. I was a child again, standing in a sunlit yard, handing her the broken-winged bird I'd tried to save. Her laughter echoed in my head, high and pure, belonging to a girl who hadn't yet inherited a family empire. John, her voice cracked, raw, but clear. She knew me. Instantly, instinctively. I stepped closer, heart hammering, but I stopped just short of her bed. You're here, she whispered, her lips curving faintly. I swallowed hard. Yeah. I'm here. There were 1,000 things I could have said. That I never stopped caring, that I carried her with me every day, that I hated and loved the contract in equal measure. But none of it came out. The words stuck, heavy with all that had changed in me. Her fingers twitched, reaching slightly. I hesitated, then wrapped mine gently around hers. Her skin was warm, real. Not the lifeless stillness I had grown used to. You waited, she murmured. I closed my eyes. For a split second, I let the lie live between us, because correcting it felt cruel. But deep down, I knew the truth. I hadn't been waiting. Not anymore. The conversation was fragmented, stilted. Her voice carried exhaustion, but also curiosity. She asked about the months she'd lost, about who had been visiting, about me. And each time she asked about me, I faltered. I couldn't tell her about the leaky apartment above the laundromat, about filing manuscripts at a crumbling publishing house, about laughing with people who didn't know her name. Because if I did, I'd be admitting that I had built a life outside her shadow. Instead, I gave her pieces. I moved. I tried something different. Been writing again. Her eyes softened. That sounds like you. It should have felt like validation. Instead, it twisted inside me, because she remembered the boy I used to be, not the man I was becoming. There was a pause, the kind that stretched too long, filling the room with unspoken truths. Finally, I forced a smile. You should rest. The doctors will want you strong. She frowned slightly, sensing my retreat, but nodded. Her eyelids drooped, heavy with fatigue. Don't go too far. I didn't answer. When I stepped out into the corridor, my chest ached with contradictions. Relief that she was alive. Guilt that I couldn't mirror her joy. Fear of being pulled back into a life I had fought so hard to escape. Her aunt caught my eye again. She'll need you now more than ever. I managed a polite nod, but inside, a voice rose clear and defiant. No. She needs herself. And I need mine. For so long, I had defined myself by her condition, by the contract, by the expectations of everyone orbiting her name. But standing there, with the sterile lights buzzing above me, I understood something vital. I could care about her without surrendering myself. I wasn't the boy who signed a contract anymore. I was a man who had learned how to walk away. And as I left the hospital that night, the cool air hit my face like a baptism. For the first time since the call, I could breathe. Vivian was awake. Alive. And yet, I was free. Chapter 11. The rhythm of my mornings had become something sacred. I woke before the sun, brewed cheap coffee in the dented French press I'd found at a thrift store, and sat by the narrow window of my apartment as the city stirred awake. Delivery trucks rumbled below, and the bakery across the street opened its shutters with a groan. I'd sit there with my notebook, scribbling down fragments, not always stories, sometimes just thoughts. But each word felt like proof. Proof that I belonged to myself. The days were simple. Work at the publishing office, evenings spent editing drafts or getting lost in the quiet of my own writing. Nobody there cared about my surname, about contracts or legacies. They cared about deadlines and whether I remembered to refill the paper tray. It was humble, even mundane, but it was mine. And then her message came. It wasn't a text or an email, too ordinary for Vivian. No, the hospital courier delivered a handwritten letter, sealed with her family crest like we were living in another century. I stared at the envelope for a long time, my pulse quickening at the familiar looping script on the front. John, I need to see you. Please come. There are things only you can understand. Don't leave me waiting. Vivian. My first instinct was to crumple it, toss it in the trash, and keep moving forward. I had spent months clawing my way out of her shadow, why step back in? But then I imagined her lying there, fragile but fighting, summoning strength to write those lines. Old loyalty stirred in me, and with it, guilt. That was how she always found her way back into me, not through force, but through the ache of history. By the next afternoon, I was standing outside her hospital room again. Vivian looked better than before, though still pale, still thin. A blanket covered her legs, and her hair, brushed neatly now, framed her face like the portrait of the girl I once knew. She brightened when I entered, her lips curving into something close to relief. You came. Her voice was soft, but steadier than last time. I nodded, keeping distance between us. You asked. Her eyes searched mine, as though weighing how much of me was still hers. I wasn't sure you would. You've been different. I've had to be. For a moment, silence stretched. Then she leaned forward slightly, urgency sharpening her tone. John, I can't do this without you. Everything feels strange, like the world moved while I slept. Everyone looks at me like I'm porcelain, but you've always been the one who saw me, not the Langford name. I need that again. Her words cut deep because they were true, once. I had been her anchor, her shadow, her comfort. But I wasn't the same boy anymore. I'm glad you're awake, I said carefully. But my life doesn't orbit around yours anymore. I can't go back to that. Her lips trembled, her composure cracking. You promised me, John. When we were kids, you said you'd never leave me behind. The memory rose unbidden, a summer afternoon, her hand gripping mine, our laughter echoing through fields. I had promised. But promises made by children weren't shackles meant for adulthood. I kept that promise for years, I whispered. Longer than anyone had the right to ask. But I can't keep living for you. I've started living for myself. Her eyes glossed, the desperation in them raw. Have you moved on? Is there someone else? I shook my head slowly. This isn't about someone else. It's about me. The weight of those words hung heavy. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her expression, not anger, not accusation, but fear. Fear that she couldn't pull me back. Am I not enough of a reason to stay? She asked, voice breaking. God, the plea in her tone nearly undid me. I wanted to hold her, to say yes, to make the pain vanish. But love, true love, couldn't be built on guilt or obligation. You're alive, I said gently, moving closer to rest a hand over hers. And that's enough for me to care. But it's not enough for me to give up everything I've built. Vivian, I can't lose myself again. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and stubborn. She gripped my hand tightly, as though she could anchor me by force. Don't walk away from me, John. Not after everything. I squeezed back once, firmly, then pulled away. I'm not walking away. I'll be here, on my way. But not as your shadow. Not as your crutch. I have to stand on my own now. And you'll have to learn the same. Her face crumpled, the fight draining out of her as she slumped back against the pillows. She turned her head, unable to look at me, and in that moment I saw the truth. Vivian wasn't desperate for me. She was desperate for the world she had lost, and I was the last thread that connected her to it. I stood, heart heavy but steady. Rest now. That's what matters. She didn't answer. Outside, the corridor hummed with the shuffle of nurses, the distant beeping of machines. Life moved on around me, indifferent, unstoppable. I inhaled deeply, grounding myself in the noise, in the reminder that I was just one part of a larger world. For years, I had believed that caring for Vivian meant surrendering myself. Tonight, I realized I could do both. I could care without collapsing, love without erasing myself. As I stepped out into the evening air, the city greeted me with its unrelenting pulse. People hurried past, chasing trains, laughing into phones, carrying groceries. Each one absorbed in their own battles, their own lives. I walked among them, lighter somehow. Vivian's desperation had tested me, but I hadn't broken. For the first time, I felt the strength of my own boundaries, and it felt like freedom. Chapter 12. The choice had been circling me for weeks, shadowing every step I took. Ever since Vivian's awakening, I'd been moving through my days as though standing in two worlds, one foot in the quiet independence I had built, the other still shackled to the ghost of promises I once made. But ghosts don't build futures. I could feel it in my bones. If I didn't cut the last thread, would be pulled back into her orbit forever. And I couldn't let that happen. Not anymore. The final push came on a Tuesday morning, when an envelope slid under my apartment door. Cream-colored, thick paper, stamped with the Langford crest. The kind of paper that smelled of power, tradition, suffocation. Inside, a letter, not from Vivian, but from her family. John, Vivian needs stability. She trusts you. Come home. It's time to stop running from what you were born into. We expect your presence at the estate this weekend. Do not disappoint. No signature, just expectation. I stared at the words, heat crawling up my throat. Come home. As if my life outside their gates had been a detour, a mistake. As if I didn't belong to myself at all. I tore the letter in half, then in half again, until it was confetti on my floor. The sound was final, satisfying. I knew what I had to do. The hospital room was dim when I entered, blinds drawn against the afternoon light. Vivian sat upright this time, a shawl draped around her shoulders, a book in her lap she clearly hadn't been reading. Her eyes flicked up the moment I stepped in, relief and dread mingling in their depths. You got their letter, she said quietly. I did. And you came. I shook my head. Not for them. For you. This is the last time, Viv. Her lips parted as if I'd struck her. Last time. I pulled the chair closer but didn't sit. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. I can't do this anymore. The waiting. The guilt. The weight of being everything you need while I lose who I am. I cared for you, more than I can ever explain. But caring doesn't mean belonging. Not anymore. She blinked hard, her voice sharp with panic. John, you can't just walk away. Not after everything we've been through. You're part of me. You always have been. I admitted. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being me. And now that I've found myself again, I can't hand that away. Not even to you. Her fingers gripped the blanket, knuckles white. So that's it? You're just going to leave me here? Abandon me? The word stung, abandon. But I breathed through it. I'm not abandoning you. I'm choosing myself. There's a difference. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over as she whispered, I thought we'd always be together. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small, worn photograph, the two of us as children, mud-streaked and smiling in the summer sun. I had carried it for years, tucked away like a talisman. I placed it on her bedside table. This will always be part of me. You'll always be part of me. But I can't carry it forward anymore. It belongs here, with you. Her hand hovered over the photo but never touched it. She looked at me as though seeing me clearly for the first time, not as her anchor, her shadow, her guarantee, but as a man stepping out of reach. Don't go, she whispered, voice breaking. I forced myself to meet her gaze, even as my chest ached. Goodbye, Vivian. And then I turned, walking out before I could be swallowed by her sorrow. The air outside hit me like a baptism, cool, sharp, alive. For the first time, there was no invisible chain tugging me back. I felt hollow and whole all at once. That weekend, instead of the Langford estate, I went to the cafe down the street from my apartment. A place I'd passed 100 times but never entered. The bell over the door chimed as I stepped in, greeted by the warm buzz of conversation, the clink of mugs. I ordered a coffee and found a corner table. Soon, someone from the publishing office spotted me, waved me over. I joined them, and before long, I was laughing, sharing stories, feeling the strange warmth of belonging to something ordinary, something real. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't gilded halls or whispered legacies. But it was mine. Over the next weeks, I found myself drawn deeper into that community, co-workers, neighbors, people who knew me simply as John. Not as Vivian's shadow, not as the boy who promised, but as the man who showed up, who listened, who existed on his own terms. There was freedom in that simplicity. Sometimes, late at night, I thought of her. I wondered if she stared at that photograph, if she cursed my name, if she finally understood. My chest ached with the memory of her smile, the echo of her laughter. But grief didn't control me anymore. It lived beside me, like an old scar, tender, but no longer bleeding. I had cut the thread. One evening, as I walked home, the city alive around me, I paused at a crosswalk. Cars rushed past, lights flickered, voices rose and fell in the night air. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost passing through. I felt present, solid, free. I stepped forward when the light changed, leaving the past where it belonged. Chapter 13. I never realized how quickly life could grow roots when you finally stopped pulling them up. The weeks after saying goodbye to Vivian were quiet, ordinary, and in that ordinariness, something miraculous bloomed. I fell into rhythm. Mornings spent at work, evenings shared with coworkers over cheap takeout or laughter in the cafe down the street, nights at home with my notebook spread across the table, ideas spilling out like a tide I'd been holding back for years. It wasn't glamorous. But it was real. And it was mine. There was one constant thread woven through those weeks, Elena. She worked in design at the publishing office, sharp-eyed and quick-witted, always with a streak of paint on her hand from projects she worked on after hours. She wasn't someone who demanded the room like Vivian once had. Elena was quieter, steadier, a kind of gravity you didn't notice until you realized you were already leaning her way. It started simple, coffee breaks, trading sarcastic remarks during long meetings, the kind of easy banter that built a bridge before you even knew it was there. But slowly, I found myself looking forward to her company more than I cared to admit. One Thursday evening, she stopped by my desk with a stack of proofs. "You're working too late again," she said, smirking. "And you're not," I countered. She shrugged. "The difference is, I enjoy mine." Then, softer, almost hesitant, "There's an exhibit this weekend. Local artists. Thought you might like it." It wasn't a date, not really. But the invitation hung in the air like a door creaking open. For the first time in years, I felt the urge to step through. That night, I found an envelope waiting outside my apartment door. Not the crisp ivory of the Langford crest this time, plain, unmarked, almost desperate in its simplicity. My stomach sank as I picked it up. Inside, a single letter, written in Vivian's sweeping script. "John, I don't know how else to reach you. You've shut me out, and maybe I deserve that, but please, just see me one more time. I can't let go without speaking to you. Don't turn your back on what we were." For a long while, I sat staring at the page. My pulse thudded heavy in my ears. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let silence be my answer. But I knew Vivian well enough to realize she wouldn't stop unless I faced her. So I went. We met at the conservatory, her choice, always her choice. The place smelled of damp earth and blooming orchids, glass ceiling arching high overhead. She stood by the fountain, pale against the explosion of green, her eyes hollow with something between anger and desperation. "You came," she said, relief flickering across her face. "I came to end this," I answered. Her lips trembled. "John, don't say that. You don't mean it." I drew a breath. "I do." Her voice cracked, climbing in pitch. "How can you throw us away? After everything?" I was in that hospital bed, and the only thing I held on to was the thought that you'd still be there when I opened my eyes. That we'd find our way back. I swallowed, her words cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. "Vivian, I was there for years. I gave up myself for you. And when you woke up, I thought maybe that meant something. But all it meant was that I'd been standing still while the rest of my life passed me by." Her eyes filled with tears. "So you'll just walk away? Choose someone else over me?" The truth hovered on my lips, the quiet spark of Elena, the laughter I'd found outside Vivian's shadow. But this wasn't about another person. It was about me. "I'm not choosing someone else over you," I said firmly. "I'm choosing me. My life. My future. And that means letting you go." She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "I can't let you go." My chest ached, but my voice stayed steady. "You don't have to. I'm doing it for us both." For a moment, all I heard was the trickle of water in the fountain, the flutter of wings in the rafters above. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me as though I'd become a stranger. Maybe I had. I turned and walked away. This time, I didn't look back. The weekend came, and I found myself standing beside Elena at the art exhibit. Light spilled across canvases, colors bold and unashamed. She moved through the gallery with quiet confidence, pausing to study each piece, her expression alive with thought. At one point, she glanced at me and smiled. Not a demand, not a plea, just an invitation to exist beside her. And I realized how different it felt, to stand with someone who didn't ask me to be less of myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift completely. Later that night, back in my apartment, I opened the window. The city stretched out before me, alive and endless, humming with possibility. I thought of Vivian one last time, the girl she was, the woman she had become, the version of me that belonged to her. And then, I let it all go. The night air rushed in, cool against my skin. Somewhere in the distance, laughter rang out, carried in the wind. I smiled, stepping back from the window, knowing I was no longer looking at what I'd lost but at everything still waiting ahead. My life was mine now, finally. And I intended to live it. Chapter 14. The city was just beginning to stir when I stepped out onto the balcony. A cup of coffee warming my hands. The sky was a slow unfurling of light, streaks of pink and gold brushing against the retreating night. It struck me, in that quiet moment, how far I had come, not in miles, but in something greater. I used to wake with a weight on my chest. Mornings meant obligation, meant surrendering another day to someone else's orbit. I would rise already tired, already bracing myself for Vivian's shadow, whether it was the silence of her coma or the noise of her commands. Now, mornings felt like a possibility. I leaned against the railing, sipping slowly, and thought back over the years. There had been so many turning points, each one carving something out of me and leaving space for something else to grow. Standing by Vivian's hospital bed, believing love meant sacrifice. Watching her family treat me like an accessory, not a man. Enduring her return and the sharp reminder that the loyalty I thought we shared was only mine to bear. And finally, walking away. That was the moment everything shifted. It wasn't just about her, it was about me deciding that my life was worth more than waiting for someone else to value it. The ache was real. It always would be. But I realized pain wasn't the enemy. Pain was the teacher. My thoughts drifted to my family, to the small house I grew up in, the evenings at the dinner table where my father always told me, "You can lose everything else, John, but if you lose your self-respect, you've lost it all." I hadn't understood it back then. Respect seemed like something external, given by others, withheld by those in power. But now I knew, it was internal. It was choosing to stand tall, even when others tried to bend you. My mother's voice came to me too, softer but no less enduring. Love is only real when it makes you more yourself, not less. I smiled faintly. It had taken me years, mistakes, and heartbreak to realize how right she was. I wanted them to see me now. Not because I had climbed to some shining success, but because I had found my footing, finally. I was living a life I could claim as my own. I believed they would be proud. Inside, my desk was cluttered with drafts and outlines. The publishing project I had started as a side task was gaining attention, and there were whispers of promotion. But beyond titles or paychecks, what mattered most was that I enjoyed it. Words had become my way of making sense of the chaos, of transforming it into something useful. Elena's encouragement had helped, though I didn't fool myself into thinking she was the answer to everything. She was simply proof. Proof that healthy connections existed, proof that companionship didn't have to come at the price of losing myself. Whether that thread between us deepened or not, I was grateful for it. Growth wasn't only about what I gained, but about what I released. Sometimes, though, in the in-between hours when the city grew quiet, I still thought of Vivian. I could almost hear her laughter echoing from those first days, or feel the chill of her disdain in the later ones. She was a ghost threaded through my memory, stitched into the fabric of who I had been. But ghosts can't touch the living unless you let them. I carried her presence the way you carry an old scar, a reminder, not a wound. She had shaped me, yes. But she no longer defined me. And I found I could think of her now without bitterness. There was sadness, certainly, for what could never be repaired. But mostly, there was release. I looked again at the horizon, where the sun was breaking fully over the skyline. The light spilled across the rooftops, catching windows, turning steel and glass into fire. It felt like a promise, not of perfection, but of possibility. I didn't know what the next year would bring. Maybe travel. Maybe a book of my own. Maybe love that grew steadily, not dramatically, but with roots that held. What I knew was this: I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't chasing shadows or clinging to chains. I was walking forward, one step at a time, into a future I was finally free to shape. And for the first time, that was enough. I raised my cup in a small, private toast to the morning, to my parents, to the boy I used to be and the man I had become. Here's to self-respect. Here's to love that builds, not breaks. Here's to a life that belongs to me. The sun rose higher, bright and unashamed, and I turned back inside, ready to begin the day. Because the rest of my story, the real story, was still waiting to be written.